give you the description of our four speakers in the order they will speak, and they will take it from there. Scott Porter, right here, hold your applause. He's Managing Director and Founder of Global Carbon Group, focused on market-based conservation with an emphasis on forestry and land use projects in tropical and subtropical regions. He's worked on forestry and land use projects, emerging renewable energy technologies, carbon markets, commercializing biogas facilities, and methane capture and destruction. How many people know methane is way worse for climate change than carbon dioxide? Yeah, you know, but it doesn't get as much attention because it comes from poop and things like that. Joshua Hart, at that end, at the far left, he gave up flying and car ownership and began to campaign for environmental and social change. He has worked as a professional transportation planning advocate for the last 10 years at Rails to Trails Conservancy and the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition, and I'm a member. His research, entitled Driven to Excess, presents the social and quality of life impacts of automobile traffic on local residents, and it was covered in over 100 international media outlets. Lonely Planet excerpted his writing in the book Flightless, Incredible Journeys Without Leaving the Ground. I like that idea. But marijuana is a big product in California. But that's Tiffany McCormick Potter, the good-looking one on the stage, founded Streamline, a consulting practice for entities developing eco-assets. She holds a master's degree from Yale University, and she was formerly at Point Carbon, where she launched a trading analytics tool for carbon markets. And finally, batting cleanup is Gopal Dayeneni, who is in our book, Building the Green Economy. He works for social, economic, environmental, and racial justice through organizing and campaigning, teaching, writing, speaking, and direct action. He serves on the planning committee for Movement Generation Justice, an ecology project, and the Ruckus Society and the International Accountability Project. He's the lead organizer of the Education Circle of Change. He's an elementary and early childhood educator, and lucky dog, he currently stays home with his children and crams in political projects on the side. So please join me in giving a warm Green Festival greeting to these folks. And we'll start with Scott Porter.
Thank you very much. One, I'd like to pitch something that the San Francisco Carbon Collaborative is a new organization that is bringing together a lot of stakeholders in the city around carbon markets, and innovative techniques in carbon. Okay. I just wanted to mention that I'm also a member of something called the San Francisco Carbon Collaborative, which is a nonprofit which brings together many stakeholders in carbon and issues around carbon markets and carbon offsetting, and also carbon project development. Can everybody hear me? Okay, great, thanks. We're currently at a critical crossroads in the pursuit of a global agreement on climate change. Climate change doubters are becoming more vocal. It is part of the U.S. conservative movement to just say no on everything, and part of that no is climate change as well. For example, Jim Inhofe, who you might know as the senator from Oklahoma, has recently stated that he wants to arrest or put out arrest warrants for the 6 top climate scientists in the United States for fraud. It's a little scary when you think about it. It harkens back to, you know, days in the 1940s or 1930s in another place. The evidence for you know, even though people are doing it, the evidence and the science is becoming more compelling that climate change is real and that human activity is responsible for climate change. Also, energy demand. The other issue is that as the population grows and as demographics grow, energy demand is growing commensurate with the need to support, you know, the population and demographic growth. China and India, along with the U.S. and the EU, as they're coming out of a recession, a deep recession, are going to have very, very large increased demand for energy. And most of that energy, unfortunately, is going to be supplied by fossil fuel sources. So the prospects for alleviating climate change, or else providing stabilization of CO2 levels in the atmosphere, is pretty bleak. So, you know, if you look at the top 4 GHG contributors in the world, which is kind of interesting, it's the US and China. and the other two are Brazil and Indonesia. And not only, so the point I'm trying to make here is that the US and China, their emissions are due to fossil fuels, or a majority of their emissions, but in Brazil and Indonesia, their emissions are due to rapidly deforestation of their tropical forests by either illegal logging, fires, or other sort of man-made activities. But on the other side, at the same time, something that's promising is that the European Union and Japan have recently extended their Kyoto commitments, which means that their agreement to put a cap on emission levels from their fossil fuel sources is extending beyond the 2012 deadline. And that's a great thing. As a matter of fact, they've increased their cap levels. Irrespective of what goes on at the UN level, they have, as a group or as an individual country, agreed to extend their caps. Also, China and India, for the first time, have signed on to the Copenhagen Accord, which is a general agreement, in soft terms, for global cooperation and climate change. So that's sort of the backdrop of what's going on. Our discussion is about carbon offsets. Carbon offsets are a financial instrument whose responsibility is to help mitigate CO2 levels in the atmosphere. Basically, there are two markets for carbon offsets. There's a corporate market or a regulatory market, and there's a voluntary market. The corporate market or the regulatory market operates under a cap, where emission sources, by regulation, by government fiat, by global fiat, can only emit up to a certain level. And they use offsets as part of the mechanism so that they can comply with that cap. The other mechanism, or the other market in which offsets are used, is the voluntary market, which is probably what people most know about here in this audience, where people buy offsets to mitigate their own personal activities, whether it be a corporation or an individual or a small business. If they're going to fly somewhere and their flight emits a certain amount of CO2 tons, they buy an offset to mitigate that, to basically make it carbon neutral. The reason offsets occur, and people need to understand this, is that offsets are part of the whole idea of carbon finance. And offsets allow projects to be financially viable so that they can occur to mitigate carbon. Typical offset projects are renewable energy, wind power, hydro, biomass, methane capture, whether it be animal, for example, big dairy farms have a lot of manure. And the manure is typically put into a pond, and it's let there in the pond through anaerobic respiration. Methane is released in the air. That's been the case, and that's been the case in California. Methane has a greenhouse gas equivalent of either 21 to 25 times what CO2 is. So therefore, it's 21 or 25 times more potent in terms of global warming than CO2. So by covering that and destroying the methane, either by converting it to energy or flaring it, you can gain advantage, or you can gain advantage or benefit to the climate. And for somebody to do that, they're going to need to be paid, because to install those types of procedures, to make the kind of capital commitment to not just cover the methane or cover the pond, but also comply with all the regulations and install the equipment that's necessary. It's expensive. It's a capital budget. Well, anyway, I'll go for it. So anyway, so there's voluntary markets. Some of the big issues around offsets currently is accounting for offsets. And the issues around that are baseline and measurement. Offsets are accounted for on a counterfactual basis. The other big issue is additionality, and that's a key word with offsets. Additionality is a term that means that without the revenue from carbon, this type of activity would not have occurred otherwise. So therefore, if this activity would have occurred from other means or from other financial mechanisms, then the offset really has no value. For it to have value as an offset, it must occur some other place. I think I'm going to stop here and move on, but I do have a lot more to say, and I'm sure we can get into it.